Good morning, I'm Rowena Crosby.
And I'm Deborah Renner, and we're your co-hosts for this show. Thank you for joining us for the next 17 minutes for your Invisible Toolbox, the show sponsored by Tero International that features the book Row and I co-authored, and every week we look at a tool for working more effectively with others.
And today we're going to talk about a tool that I think speaks to all of us. It really relates to human motivation. So what motivates you? What do you think motivates people to do a good job at work? Do you think it's pay? Job promotions? Good benefits?
Well, a lot of people think those are some of the biggest motivators, but in actuality, it's incorrect. According to research, here's what really motivates people. It's really interesting. There's three things: autonomy, relating to others, and competence. Those might not have been on the top of your list, but those are the things research says.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So let's talk about those three things. First of all, autonomy. Employees who have autonomy have a say in how they do their jobs, the type of projects they work on. And of course, if they have autonomy, it's because they usually have supervisors who support that autonomy.
And employees who connect with others and actually communicate supportively, listen effectively to others, and have built trust with their colleagues. And it's interesting, they also work in offices that breed creativity and new ideas.
Interesting. And finally, competence. What does that mean? Well, it means employees have the opportunity to improve, and they have the chance to gain some mastery over something that's important for them to do.
Not knowing what truly motivates employees can mean that many managers do not keep their teams motivated, and that's a shame. And it seems to be a very common issue. Gallup research says that 70%, that's a huge percentage
That
of
is a huge
employees,
percent.
they don't come to work motivated, and they actually don't come motivated to give their best performance.
7 out of 10.
Yeah.
That's a huge number. And what's more, 52% of employees they report not feeling engaged at work, and 18% report being actively disengaged. So the difference between not being engaged and being actively disengaged is if we're actively disengaged, it's not just us holding ourselves back. We may be creating an environment that makes it hard for other people to contribute at their best. So that's really bad. And it's safe to say this is a big problem inside of workplaces around the country. And so what do managers do? What's a common thing you suppose they do to try to motivate their team? They tend to use external motivators. And when they should be tapping into internal motivation. That's what we're going to talk about.
It is. So that is the focus of our show today, tapping into internal motivation. And we're going to take a look at this from both the worker's perspective and the manager's perspective, because it's actually important from both sides.
It is. So if you're a worker, you want to do work that you're passionate about and that makes you feel like you're engaged.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a manager, you're naturally going to be concerned about creating that environment where employees feel like they're contributing meaningfully and they're passionate about their work.
That's true. And so our development challenge for today is going to give you 5 steps that you can take to actually determine what do you want out of your career, and then how do you go about getting that.
And our social media posts are pretty interesting today. They're going to give us additional information on how to tap into our own motivation and take a look at it, what's your role if you're a leader. And they'll also give some additional details that we can't possibly cover in our 17 minutes together.
And we have a really good field guide segment today. It's going to take a look at a study that was done over 60 years ago, but it is still relevant today. And this study explores all the factors that cause satisfaction and those that cause dissatisfaction in the workplace.
Exactly. So those of you following along in the book, Your Invisible Toolbox, are going to find us in chapter 56. The chapter is titled, The Heart is Where the Enthusiasm Is. If you don't have your own copy of the book, you can scroll down, click on the link, and get your copy. So let's get started.
So first, let's take a look at a few of the characteristics of the most motivated people. That'll be kind of
who are these
interesting to
people?
do. And according to Inc., they enjoy challenging themselves and learning something new.
And they also don't judge their coworkers, and they don't participate in gossip. That's kind of tempting to do. And instead, they objectively observe their coworkers' both successes and mistakes.
They do, and when motivated people make mistakes, they're free and they readily apologize for them. They actually accept the feedback, and then they take that feedback to do better next time, to actually increase their performance. They don't blame other things or other people for their failures.
And not surprisingly, they stay positive when they're having bad experiences. And instead of focusing on what's wrong, they tend to focus on what is going well. And they don't overthink the missteps. I think we all do that sometimes.
We do. That can get in our way. Motivated people also have a really clear idea of what their goals are, and not just the short term, but also the long term goals. And they don't give up on the vision when there's a few speed bumps along the way.
So all of this sounds terrific, but how can we really tap into it? It's not like we can just turn our motivation on like as if it's a faucet. So we're going to look at some things today.
And here's one component we haven't talked about yet, and that's passion. And actually, passion and motivation go hand in hand. If someone is passionate about something, they can actually outperform someone who has a higher skill level or has more qualifications for the job just because of their passion. And unfortunately, without passion, we can become very complacent about what we're doing and not care about the effect of our work.
And we've all seen situations like that where the passionate person outperforms the more skilled individual. So when you enjoy what you're doing at work, you enjoy the people that you're working with, you're taking pride in what you're doing, and you feel like you're making a difference, that's when we're going to have a better chance of success and in tapping that internal motivation.
So now we've talked about the details of what motivates people. Now we're going to take a look at how can you find and actually keep your passion and your inner motivation. And we're going to do that by taking a look at our invisible tool of the week. And the tool is to tap inner motivation.
And those of you following along in the book are going to find us on page 137.
As we said at the beginning of the program, we started to discuss this from two perspectives, and they're really important. The perspective of the employee and actually the perspective of the manager. So let's just start with the worker's perspective.
And almost none of us get up every single day ready to take on the world, but we can still figure out how to boost our career motivation overall. And you can do this no matter where you are in your career. Could be a new job, could be you've been in the same job for years, could be you haven't even figured out what you want to do with your career yet.
Forbes suggests asking yourself, what is it you really want to accomplish in your career? And it doesn't mean to be some big goal like saving the world. It's just what's important to you, and identifying that. What do you want to make happen at work that won't happen if you're not the one doing that? Find that answer and really commit to it.
And remember that you're probably not going to accomplish all of your goals tomorrow or even in the next month. We all experience some small steps forward, and we all experience some setbacks. And if we can take some pride in the steps that are going forward and be patient with those inevitable setbacks we encounter.
Well, we can utilize our coworkers, our friends, our family to actually help keep us motivated. It's very important to be around people who celebrate our successes, and they can also keep us from giving up or starting to procrastinate. And they also can give us a different perspective on how we might go about to achieve the goal that we've set.
So those are some terrific ideas if we're the worker. What about if we're the leader? We're managing a group of people. We know it's our job to try to keep our team motivated. How do you suppose that managers typically do that? Well, a lot of times they look to doing things like bonuses and better benefits.
It's all the external things that come to mind first.
Yes.
But as we mentioned, studies shows that people are actually motivated by very different things. And it could be things like a sense of accomplishment, pride in their work, a sense of growth, being challenged, and working with great colleagues. So these are the things that we should focus on to try to influence motivation in the workplace.
And one of the ways that we can build motivation as a leader, according to Entrepreneur, is to schedule time together for team building activities. Sometimes you can even take people off-site, away from the office, to do something together that they find fun or exciting. And this starts to build those connections that we talked about are so important for tapping our inner motivation and also pushing us a little out of comfort zones.
And it can make sure every person on your team has the support they need, or they have the tools that they need in order to be able to be effective, to meet a deadline or do their job. Those things help build trust.
Exactly. Now, there is another thing, and this touches on external motivation, but it's available to leaders, and that's the opportunity for people to work remotely.
Yes.
And the jury's out on whether or not that works, but do look at it as a potential tool. Because sometimes, even though we think less work can get done, if we do the remote thing, for some people it's a good fit in little small bursts, it can actually increase productivity, lower stress. It increases that autonomy that we talked about really earlier, and can boost morale. So think about that as an opportunity.
And so maybe most importantly, just showing employees appreciation, acknowledging what they've done. Even, it doesn't have to be, like we said, through the bonus or the raise. It might just be sharing what they've done with others. This can make a world of difference and make them feel proud of the work they're doing and that it's important to the organization.
Well, now it's time for our development challenge of the week. We've talked today about recognizing the small steps that we can reach goals and how to celebrate these small wins. Whether or not it's you or steps that your employee's taking.
So now we're going to take a look at what are those steps, and we encourage you to write these down so you can be reminded of them later.
So the first is determine your goals. How many times we don't even think about what's the bigger picture, what are our goals, and we want some balanced ones, some work related, some that are personal ones. And if you're a manager, take time to sit down with people and share what the team or the company goals are and find out what their individual goals are.
That's so important.
It is.
You can integrate them. And then think about not just the short term, but the long-term outcomes of this goal. What will you or a team member or the organization get from achieving this goal, and how will it make a difference in the office and in general? So the long term is really important to focus on.
Exactly. And then the third step is to start breaking these goals down. Some of them are pretty large, so we've got to look at them a little bit smaller. And if we can bring people together and get all of their input into what are the steps we might take, then we can get everyone excited.
We can, and then next identify what is the next first step that you need to take. Again, if you're in a meeting, it's helpful to get suggestions from everybody in the room. Inclusivity.
Exactly. And then finally, start working towards the goal and remember to celebrate the successes along the way. That really taps in our motivation.
We challenge you to take some time this week and really do start working on this list. And when you're done, take a look at your team and yourself and see if you aren't more motivated because of it.
Now, we're excited about our field guide segment today. We touch on this, those of you who have read the book, in chapter 56 of your Invisible Toolbox.
We do, and you might have heard of the experiment. It was actually done in 1959 by an American psychologist. His name was Frederick Herzberg, and it's called the two-factor theory, or the motivation hygiene theory.
Okay, so pay attention to this. The words matter, isn't it? So we're going to talk first of all about Herzberg's theory around internal, intrinsic rewards. And these are things like achievement, recognition, responsibility, advancement, and growth. Those are the things that we now know, we've looked at, lead to satisfaction. So here's what he theorizes. The absence of those does not lead to dissatisfaction. It leads to no satisfaction. So those two things might sound like they're the same thing, but actually they're not. No satisfaction is closer to indifference. And indifference can make workers unconcerned to do their best work. So that's kind of fascinating on internal rewards.
Very fascinating. And at the same time, Herzberg said that external rewards, like a good company policy or a good salary or nice working conditions, those actually will not necessarily lead to job satisfaction, but the absence of those things will lead to dissatisfaction. It's kind of like electricity and water. When we have them, we really don't think about them. When we don't have them, that's all we think about.
So how does this relate to motivation in the workplace? Well, whether you're a worker or you're a manager, it all reinforces some of the things that we've been talking about today and the importance of internal motivation.
It does. Having a good salary, good insurance, good vacation time, those are all great things to offer to employees, but truthfully, they don't spend a lot of time thinking about these things if they have them. These won't automatically lead to someone being satisfied with their job, although not having them might actually lead to some anxiety and dissatisfaction.
So if most of the studies say people want it to be fair. So if my pay and my benefits feel about right, it's like that water and electricity thing. Otherwise, we're dissatisfied. So if we can remember that this is really more about making a difference, connecting to other people, taking pride in work, that's where the internal motivation comes from.
Well, let's take a look at this week's social media posts. If you follow Tero on social media, you know that we post several different things every single day that have to do with interpersonal skills topics, and we're going to highlight 2 of this week's posts.
And they relate both to the workers and to the managers, and they're worth a look at in full, even though we've touched on some of the points in our show today.
So the first one comes from Forbes, and it's the one we referenced when we were discussing motivation from the worker's perspective. And it discusses how to tap into your own internal motivation. That's so important, not just for workers, but actually managers as well. If you're a manager, it's worth taking a look. It's going to be on all Tero social media platforms today.
And our second featured post comes from Entrepreneur. And this is an article where they discuss ways for leaders to try to tap into motivation for employees, and it gives all kinds of great ideas. We hope that you'll take a look at that. It'll be on all Tero social media platforms on Wednesday. In our final thoughts for the day, we're going to be looking at a quote that's in chapter 56 of our book, Your Invisible Toolbox. It's a quote from Stephen Valbrack. He's co-owner of Midland Aircraft, and he shares his thoughts on leadership and employees and motivation. Now, in full disclosure, Stephen is Deb's son, so this is close to home, and the father of your grandchildren.
Yes.
But the quote, I think, is inspiring for all of us that are talking about motivation in the workplace.
Yes, proud of him, but proud of this quote, so take a listen. He says, "It is very tricky to use external motivation because managers have such a hard time finding a reward with value to the employee. It takes a manager who knows an individual very personally to find an external motivation with value, and then one that won't offend other employees. Employee motivation may consume management. I like to focus less on the right formula for amounts of external motivation and more on creating a culture where internal motivation is grown. To me, it comes down to the teaching to fish parable. I can give a fish to an employee, or I can teach them to get fish on their own. I found that spending time creating a culture where individuals see personal success and team success helps drive internal motivation."
Words of wisdom for all of us.
Yes.
Well, thanks for joining us today. If you missed any portion of the program or want to share it with others, you'll find the entire program on Tero's YouTube channel. Join us again next Monday morning at 9:03 Central Time, where we'll explore another tool in your Invisible Toolbox.
And now it's your turn. We do welcome your ideas and suggestions. Please email your ideas to ideas@yourinvisiblettoolbox.com, and we will incorporate them into future shows. Find us out there on your favorite social media platform. We'd really like to thank Kyle Plummer today, who is not only our director but also our camera person today, and Stephen for that quote.
Yes, because Rachel's in class today
Exactly,
furthering
she
her
is.
learning. And thanks to all of you for joining us, and that's a wrap.